When the HOA rolled in with bulldozers and clipboards, no one expected anything more than another petty dispute over zoning lines or lawn heights. But when they tore up the backyard of my grandfather's old house, right where that odd little hill had been since I was a kid, they uncovered something way bigger than anyone could have imagined. Beneath the dirt was a tunnel, not just some drainage pipe or an old root cellar, a full-on underground passage hidden for decades. My grandfather never talked much about his past. He was a quiet man, always tinkering with radios and reading old newspapers in his garage. But he used to tell me stories, half joking, half serious, about secret missions and Cold War secrets. I always thought he was just being dramatic, until now. Turns out that tunnel, it wasn't his at all. It belonged to the US Army. Built during the Cold War, used for transport, communication, maybe more. And he had kept it hidden all these years, right under the HOA's nose. No one knew, not even my mom. But now that it's been unearthed, questions are piling up. Why was it there? What was it really used for? And why did my grandfather never say a word, not even on his deathbed? The real story is only just beginning. After the tunnel was exposed, everything changed. The HOA acted like it was just some old hazard, something to be filled in and forgotten. But I knew better. I remembered the way Grandpa used to disappear into the backyard for hours, especially after dark. He said he was just clearing brush. But now I wondered if he was keeping an eye on something, or protecting it. The more I dug, literally and figuratively, the more questions I found. There were markings on the tunnel walls, faded symbols, rusted metal brackets, even what looked like part of an old comms panel buried in the dirt. I started looking through Grandpa's old things in the garage, boxes of papers, photos, even a map tucked into an old radio manual. The map showed lines, routes, connections to places miles away. Could this have been part of a Cold War military transport system, hidden in plain sight beneath our feet? Nobody in the neighborhood knew a thing. Or if they did, they weren't talking. And then there was the box I found, sealed, dusty, with Grandpa's initials burned into the lid. I haven't opened it yet. Honestly, I'm not sure I'm ready. But I know one thing. The HOA had no idea what they destroyed. And now that the tunnel's secret is out, I'm starting to think someone else might be watching too. I couldn't stop thinking about that tunnel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandpa's face, calm, quiet, like he knew this would come someday. I finally opened the box. Inside were old black and white photos, military documents with parts blacked out, and a worn-out ID badge with Grandpa's name next to a US Army seal. I always knew he served, but this was different. One photo showed him standing in front of a tunnel entrance, almost identical to the one the HOA destroyed. But it wasn't in our backyard. It looked like it was somewhere in the desert, maybe New Mexico or Nevada. I started reaching out. Online forums, Cold War veterans groups, even an old military historian. Most people thought I was chasing shadows. But one man responded. He said the tunnels were part of a Cold War contingency plan, underground routes built to move supplies, documents, even personnel, in case of nuclear conflict. But the program was shut down, or so they claimed. At the same time, the HOA started acting strange. One of the board members knocked on my door late at night, said he needed to ask a few questions about what I found. He wasn't friendly, he wasn't curious, he was nervous. Now I'm wondering if this wasn't just some forgotten relic. Maybe someone didn't forget, maybe someone never left. I started watching my back after that late-night visit. Cars I didn't recognize were parked near the house. My mail started arriving torn. Even my phone had this weird buzzing every time I mentioned the tunnel. I tried to brush it off, but something wasn't right. I went back to the site where the HOA had filled in the ground. It was sealed tight. Fresh concrete, no sign of the tunnel. But I knew where the old access hatch was, the one Grandpa had hidden under the shed. When I lifted the wooden floorboards, there it was, a rusted metal door with a keypad lock. I remembered numbers from Grandpa's army badge and tried them. On the third try, it clicked. Inside, the air was stale, but the tunnel stretched out farther than I ever imagined. There were crates, still sealed, labeled with faded government stamps. I didn't dare open them yet, but deeper in, the tunnel split. One path curved toward the east, maybe toward the old airfield miles away. The other dropped lower, into total darkness. That's where I heard something, not an echo, not rats, something mechanical, something humming. I ran back up, heart pounding. When I got outside, that same HOA board member was standing by the shed. This time, he wasn't alone, and he wasn't smiling. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at me while the two men behind him fanned out, like they'd done this before. One of them had a small black case, the kind you see in spy movies. I tried to act calm, like I hadn't just been inside a Cold War-era tunnel filled with who knows what. The board member finally stepped forward and said, "You shouldn't be down there. It's not safe." His voice wasn't angry. It was flat, rehearsed, like he'd said those words before. I asked him straight up, "Who are you really?" Because no HOA guy walks around with backup and a case that looks like it holds surveillance gear. He didn't answer, but the guy with the case pulled out a small device and scanned the area around the hatch. The machine beeped. He nodded, and that's when things shifted. They weren't just trying to seal the tunnel. They were looking for something. I knew then, this wasn't about trespassing or safety codes. They were after whatever Grandpa had been hiding. Maybe it was those sealed crates. Maybe it was something deeper, something connected to those blacked-out files in the box. I backed away slowly, trying to keep cool, but the board member leaned in close and whispered, "If you go back down there, you won't be the only one watching." That's when I realized the tunnel wasn't abandoned, and it never had been. I waited until just before dawn to go back in. I didn't tell anyone. I left my phone behind, grabbed Grandpa's old flashlight, and slipped through the shed hatch before the neighborhood woke up. The tunnel was colder than before, like the air itself had shifted. I followed the deeper path, the one that dipped into darkness, and after maybe 30 minutes of careful walking, I found a steel door. It looked newer than everything else, bolted into the stone like it didn't belong. I almost turned back. Almost. I pushed it open. Inside was a small room, clean, powered, lit by dim red bulbs, and in the center, a table. On it, more crates, open this time. Inside were reels of magnetic tape, old floppy drives, hand-labeled files marked Operation Fallason Run. I didn't know what that was until I flipped open one of the folders and saw maps, not just of tunnels, but of suburban neighborhoods across the country. Each one marked with tiny red dots. Some were dated 1984. Some had dates from just 5 years ago. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, ready for the board member and his goons, but it wasn't them. It was a man in a military jacket, the same one from the photo with Grandpa, but he hadn't aged a day. He smiled and said, "Your grandfather didn't just protect this place, he built it. And now it's yours to finish." I didn't know what to say. The man explained that during the Cold War, my grandfather led a covert unit tasked with designing underground transport routes across the US, a system meant to survive nuclear fallout and quietly move intelligence across the country. These weren't just tunnels, they were lifelines. Only a handful of people knew they existed, and fewer were still alive. Grandpa had stayed behind to protect the final active route, hiding it beneath his home all these years. The HOA, not what it seemed. Some of them were regular folks, but a few, like the board member, were planted to monitor sites like ours, keeping tabs on old secrets that were never supposed to see daylight. They thought the network was dead, until I dug it back up. I left that tunnel knowing everything had changed. The files, the maps, the stories Grandpa never told, they weren't just history. They were a warning. A reminder that the past isn't always buried. Some secrets live just under the surface, waiting. I sealed the hatch again, quietly, respectfully. Grandpa didn't just serve his country, he protected it long after the Cold War ended. And now, I understand why. Some tunnels lead deeper than we think.